The Ural Mountains of Russia are vast, ancient, and unforgiving. For centuries, locals whispered that the high ridges and frozen valleys were cursed, haunted by spirits, stalked by things that didn't belong to this world. Most dismissed the tales as folklore, warnings told to keep villagers from wandering too far into the deadly wilderness. But in February of 1959, those whispers took on horrifying reality. 9 experienced hikers set out on a trek into the frozen expanse of the northern Urals. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, a skilled outdoorsman, respected by his peers. With him were 8 men and women, university students, seasoned in the wild, disciplined, and physically fit. Their destination, Otorten Mountain, which in the language of the native Mansi people means, "Don't go there." They never returned. When rescuers finally found them weeks later, the scene defied logic, explanation, and sanity. Their tent had been slashed open from the inside. Their belongings, coats, boots, supplies, were abandoned in the snow, and the hikers themselves were scattered across the mountainside, some barefoot, some half-dressed, their bodies bearing injuries that defied science. One had her tongue missing. Another's ribs were crushed inward with a force no human could inflict. Radiation clung to their clothing, and yet there were no signs of struggle, no evidence of an enemy. What happened that night on Dyatlov Pass remains one of the most disturbing mysteries in human history. The group began their journey in late January. They carried journals, cameras, and maps, recording every step of the way. Their spirits were high, their photos filled with laughter and smiles. They were young, strong, and confident. Nothing suggested the nightmare awaiting them, but as they pressed deeper into the mountains, the weather turned vicious. Temperatures plummeted below -20 degrees Celsius. Howling winds and blizzards slowed their progress. On February 1st, they set up camp on the slope of Koletsyakal, a name that translates chillingly to Mountain of the Dead. It was there that something or someone came for them. When search teams arrived weeks later, the tent was the first clue that something was horribly wrong. It stood partially collapsed, its fabric shredded, not from outside intrusion, but from within, as though the hikers had cut their way out in a desperate bid to escape. The footprints told another story. Bare feet, sock-covered feet, a single shoe. They led down toward the forest in neat lines at first, then scattered. The first bodies were found beneath a cedar tree at the forest's edge, stripped to their undergarments, their hands burned, as though they had tried to climb into the branches to escape something or someone. Broken twigs above them suggested they had scrambled frantically upward before falling. Nearby, 3 more were discovered, sprawled in the snow as if crawling back toward the tent, frozen mid-desperation. But it was the last 4 bodies, found months later in a ravine, that transformed the Dyatlov case from tragedy into horror. One had a fractured skull, the kind seen only in high-speed car crashes. Another's ribs were smashed inward, their heart ruptured, yet with no external wounds, as if crushed by immense pressure. The female hiker, Ludmila, was missing her eyes and her tongue, torn out with surgical precision. And radiation, traces far above background levels, clung to their clothing. The investigators were left with a puzzle that only grew darker the deeper they looked. Theories bloomed like frost in the public imagination. Some argued it was an avalanche, the weight of snow collapsing onto their tent and driving them out in panic. But experienced mountaineers rejected this. The slope was shallow, and no evidence of an avalanche was ever found. Others whispered of military experiments. The Ural Mountains were no stranger to secret tests. Could the hikers have stumbled into the path of a weapon never meant to be seen? Flashes of light in the sky were reported on the night of their deaths, strange glowing orbs drifting over the mountains. Witnesses in nearby villages described the heavens lit with fire. Was it radiation from a secret missile? A blast wave that crushed their bodies with invisible force? Or was it something far older than Soviet science? The native Mansi tribes warned of Koletsyakal, calling it cursed. Hunters refused to travel there, speaking of men of the snow, shadowy figures that stalked the peaks. Some investigators pointed to photographs taken by the hikers themselves. On their last rolls of film, in between images of snow and laughter, there are blurred shapes, towering dark figures standing among the trees. Skeptics call them tricks of light. Believers call them proof. And then there are the sounds. Rescuers reported hearing low-frequency rumbles in the distance, vibrations that seemed to come from the earth itself. Some scientists suggested infrasound, sound waves too low for the human ear but capable of inducing panic, hallucinations, even madness. Did the mountain itself drive them insane, forcing them to flee their tent and into the freezing night? The official Soviet investigation concluded only this: the cause of death was an unknown compelling force. That was all. The files were sealed, the case closed, the bodies buried. But whispers never stopped. Decades later, when the archives were reopened, the details remained as baffling as ever. No avalanche, no enemy, no evidence of a struggle. Just 9 hikers who went into the mountains and never returned the same. The Dyatlov Pass incident is more than a mystery. It is a wound in history, an unsolved riddle